So what we're going to look at today is working with gels and how to create some separation between your subject and the background, how to put gel light into the background, and how you can use colored light to add accent or drama or just pull out parts of the image that you want people to focus on. We're going to be using one of the setups that I've had before in another video. I picked it because hopefully you'll be familiar with it. The simulator model is wearing like some kind of fairly strong colors. We can see what happens when we put gel light into that. But also it's a very simple basic setup, curtain or backdrop in a studio. It's not a huge space, it's not complicated. Again, like all of these videos, I'm going to exaggerate the color or the lighting just so that you can really see what's going on. And then obviously you would then refine any of those things when you actually come to do this yourself in a studio. And I'll explain what I mean by that because I've picked a jade color, yellowy greeny tint to it, and then a red. So I'm playing like red against green just so it's really obvious. And then I'm pushing it onto this like browny kind of gold backdrop. The colors are not awesome, like deliberately, but they stand out. When you come to select colors and gels, it's really good if you can get to like a rental place where you can see the gels and choose them and get them cut yourself, because you'll see that there's loads of like subtle variations of gel. Obviously, if you're doing this with LED and you're dialing in color, it's completely different, but this is on the basis of using a strobe set. So let's have a look what we've got in the studio. Exactly the same setup as that one light setting, although I've just taken away the wall that was behind the model, so it's just the cloth curtain backdrop. Let's just have a quick look around. Camera setting will always stay the same on here. So I've got f11, 125 shutter speed, ISO 400, nothing unusual. I've got an Octa up the top, so it's like a 135. It's like a medium size Octa. That Octa will always stay in place as well. And if we check the preview image on the right, it's deliberately a little underexposed. The exposure on the face is just about there, but the fall off towards the feet, like it's getting too dark. It's too dark in the legs. That's deliberate because we're going to build some light in. We're going to layer things a little bit. We're going to show what happens when we add gel light. Check the preview image of this. And you can see what I mean. The highlight on the feet is sort of okay, but the fall off of shadow on the legs and the thigh area and so on, it's like too dark. It's not great. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to add our primary red to our Octa. And so I've kept the power the same in the light. I've literally just put the gel over the top. And what can we see with our preview image? Well, obviously it's the only light that we're using. So everything has gone completely red. We can't distinguish any colors anymore. This is what we'd expect, right? Because we're just throwing red into the picture. There's no other light source. Then to show you what that also looks like with the other color, I'm going to throw the jade onto here. You can see a difference with this, right? How the jade and the red interact differently. There's immediately a sense of different fall off of light through the image with that jade. Compare initial starting point, no gel, red gel, jade gel. So the next thing that we're going to do, keeping the Octa the same, keeping the power the same, camera position and so on, just going to bring a head at the back here, going to stick it on a stand, put it up quite high. It's a reflector, got a number 3 grid on it, so I'm kind of closing down where that light spread will be with the grids, which we've talked about a lot before. There's no gel on this light, and if we look at where it is, I'm kind of raking it across the curtain. And what I want to do with that is I want to bring out the texture of the curtain. I bring out and emphasize some idea of shadow and depth. I've put too much power deliberately into that backlight because I want to show what happens when we put a gel over that. You can see it's hot at the top right corner, and then it just pulls across the image. Now what does it do? Like the things that are good about this is it does separate the model from the background. It's a little like clumsy and obvious, but it does create some separation. There's also a bit of fall off onto the legs and the calves. So again, there's separation from the model in the background. Let's compare just the Octa only and then the Octa with that grid reflector. We notice where the light's spilling onto the floor. Obviously we notice on the curtain, there's a strong heavy shadow on the floor from the model. It's all fine. There's a little bit more interest there. Let's just zoom back out again. Now what we've done is same power on the Octa, put my jade gel back onto that light. Backlight stays the same, no gel on the light, and let's just compare those two. No gel on both lights, and then with the gel on the Octa. We get much more like extreme feeling of separation between what's happening with the model and what's happening with that background light. But also the other things to notice here is obviously we've got that in the top left, the jade from the Octa is coloring that backdrop. And then in the middle of the image, that color is kind of being knocked away by that gridded reflector light that's pushing it across. We're getting a bit of an interaction between colors. The background is maybe becoming more interesting now. What I want to do is I really want to work on that idea of separation. I want to see what happens if we add another light into this. We're going to keep it really simple with the lighting. We're only going to have 3 lights, and we're not going to do anything tricky with it. But we're just going to bring another reflector in here put it on 5, and I've got a grid number 4. So I've opened up the grid a little bit. The other one was number 3, a slightly wider pool of light out. I'm pointing it a little bit away from the feet, so it's going to kind of be bouncing down onto the floor and bouncing up into the model. Let's check that preview image. So compare it first. So Octa just on its own, then Octa with that reflector in the background, and then the third image, the Octa, the background light, and then that kind of foreground light that's pushing into the feet. Get more separation, get a more 3D sense to everything. The first thing we should kind of notice is actually that light that's hitting the boot. It's like way too bright, right? It needs dialing back a little bit. We're not going to do that. We're just going to gel the light and see what difference that makes. Because it's a great thing to know what happens when you do put a gel onto a highlight that's maybe a little bit too intense. Let's take it in stages. We've now added this jade green to the background light. Footlight, still the same. Octa, still exactly the same. Compare those two images, no gel and background gel. By raking that background light across but putting a green onto it, it sits back a little bit compared to the image on the left. Highlight is kind of toned. We still know that we need to solve what's happening with the light on the feet. So with this one, we're going to place two opposite colors, right? So we've got this red now that's pushing into the feet, and we've got green at the back. Power is still saying the same on this. And compare those two images. No gel for the front feet, and then gel for the front feet. So with that red on, we're toning it similar to how we've colored the carpet. You can see that we've got that highlight that's bright on the legs, which is really kind of creating depth to the legs. By putting the red on it, we're kind of wrapping that light around. We're sitting that highlight back a little bit. The boots sit back as well. Obviously, we've lost some of the color of the boots, but now the whole picture maybe sits together a little bit more because the highlights are pushed back. Let's see the image on its own. So now there's no gel light on the model's face, gel light in the background, gel light on the foreground. What we can also do with this is we can play it the other way. So we've put the jade back onto the Octa now. So the jade light is hitting the model. The red is the front foreground, so that's still hitting the feet. And then we've got no gel on the background light. And all we're doing with this is just moving those gels around. We're not changing the power or anything, just to show what happens when we shift the dominance, where we push colors backwards and forwards. Let's compare those two images. So without the jade on the Octa, the face is kind of coming forward. But as soon as we put that jade onto the Octa, the face sits back a little bit. Again, depends what you want to do, right? If you want to create something like more mysterious feeling, maybe you put your gel light onto your subject. If you want a face to come forward, maybe you gel everything else apart from the subject. That kind of accent that we've got on the back of the curtain, when we've taken the gel off of that curtain again seems to come forward a little bit more. So now we're going to try and create some harmony between the background and the foreground. So I've put the jade still on the Octa. I've got the jade on the background this time, and I'm keeping that red onto the foreground. So we're kind of raking a jade across the back, and we're also hitting the jade into the model's face. And there's a really big difference here. See the difference that toning that background makes, and then toning the model's face as well. The model suddenly kind of almost gets swallowed up by the environment a little bit. And then with this one, we're going to take our reflectors and we're going to put them both on jade, and then our model has the red. Pair those two images. So on the left, Octa has a jade. On the right, Octa has a red. Again, completely different feel in terms of like what's dominant in the frame. We've really changed the color of the backdrop compared to the image on the left. The image on the left, obviously the whole backdrop seems to give this kind of green feel with a highlight that's still green. Now swapping it out the other way, the backdrop has gone red with this kind of green highlight that's raking across the back. Now we're going to do the opposite of that. So both of these grid reflectors are now red, and then the top light, so the model light, the Octa, is a jade. Then we're pushing those reds across the image. So suddenly the model's face is coming forward, comparing them side by side. If I look at the left-hand image, suddenly I'm just looking at the boots. That's all I kind of really notice in that. If I look at the right-hand side, I'm just suddenly really drawn to the model's face because it's the point of difference. It seems to come forward as opposed to the red background. So you can really control where the viewer is looking or what you want to bring forward in your frame by where you put the accent highlight and where also you put that color, and how you play colors against each other. How much color you want to put in an image also will really depend on your personal preference. And there's also ratios that would work in terms of maybe you want 30% of one really strong color and 70% of another color. As we looked in the Raphael Pavarotti video with color theory, you maybe only need a small amount of one color for it to start to get balance and harmony within your picture. Too much color and suddenly it begins to dominate. In this final image, just a small amount of that jade is really bringing the face forward. Let's just compare it so we know where we've gone to with this. So The Octa with the Jade on is exactly the same power that we had before. So these two images side by side, we can really see the difference. The Octa has the same power, the same Jade filter on in both of the images, but we're raking it across the background with this red, and we're pushing light onto the floor with the red onto the boots. So suddenly again, we've really created a different feeling between the two pictures, and we've really controlled our space very quickly without doing anything tricky with the lighting, just by adding gels on. It's a great illustration, I think, of how you can transform a set. You don't need loads of lighting modifiers to do this. You just need very simple heads, basic like out-of-the-box kit, and a couple of gels. If we look at the more staggered and selected, the great thing is to decide, well, what are you drawn to? What do you want your picture to be? Maybe you really like actually a clean background with the light pushing across it, no gel onto the background. Or maybe you really like playing a green against a red. It's about juggling your preference, but also showing what do you want to come forward in the picture? What is your photograph about? The other thing to just really note, I'll show you two examples of this side by side. So this is really useful to just see exactly what's happening with the boots, right? We know that this light that's coming in towards the boots is a little bit too strong. It's a little too bright. By keeping the same power, but by toning that highlight, putting the red gel on, we're pushing the boots back a little bit. You can do this in lots of instances. Maybe your flash is a bit powerful and you want to tone a highlight, you can put just like a CTO over your flash and it will just sit it back. So hopefully that was useful working with gels and give some idea of how you can transform a basic set very quickly. And also how you can hide colors that maybe you're not super into, or transform a background wall, make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, thank you for watching.